there, welcome back to my kitchen. Today we're stocking the pantry with 4 staples that will seriously amp up your cooking. We're making my homemade beefless bouillon, chickenless bouillon, onion soup mix, and mushroom powder. Now these are absolute magic when you want to add a lot of powerful depth and flavor to any recipe. They're super easy to pull together. They store beautifully in your pantry. You can grab them at any time when you're making a recipe. So let's dive in. Okay, let's start with our mushroom powder. Now this is a secret ingredient that every plant-based kitchen should have, and this is an ingredient that a lot of chefs use when they cook. It adds a tremendous amount of umami and depth to a dish, and even people that don't care for mushrooms love a lot of dishes that are cooked with mushroom powder because it adds so much flavor. About once a year, I'll see these mushrooms at Costco. You can buy them in a lot of stores and a lot of specialty stores, and you can even get them online. And they make the perfect mushroom powder. You'll want to grind this in a food processor, or if you just want to make a tiny batch, you can grind it in a dedicated coffee bean grinder, something that you just use for maybe nuts or seeds so that it won't taint your coffee beans. And you can make the powder that way. But I like to make it in a large batch because it stores beautifully in the pantry and will keep for a very long time. So I'm just going to take our mushrooms and toss them in the food processor. And we'll grind these into a powder. You'll want to stop the food processor periodically and look at your progress and see how they're doing. And I would say they're probably about 75% there. Okay, this took about 2 minutes, and I always like to let it settle just a little bit before I take the lid off because there's a lot of powder flying around inside there. And this looks perfect. I'll just spoon this into a jar and store it in our pantry. So I made a very large jar of this mushroom powder because I use it in almost everything. I will use it in ramen, chili, soup, beans, stews. I'll also use it when I want to make gravy. I'll mix a little of this with either the beefless bouillon or the chickenless bouillon and a little cornstarch or arrowroot, some cold water, whisk it on the stove, and you've got the most fantastic plant-based gravy. Okay, now let's make that beefless bouillon. Now for decades when I cook, I would use bouillon cubes or I would use the bouillon paste. And as the years progressed, I noticed that ingredient list just got longer and longer and had more oil in it and had ingredients that I couldn't even pronounce, much less know what they were. So I finally decided enough of that, I was just gonna make my own. This stores beautifully in the pantry. You can add it to any soup or gravy or anything that you would want that traditional beef taste. I'm making this in my little dedicated grinder. Now this is just an old coffee grinder that I had that I use for spices, nuts, anything that's savory, and I keep it separate from our normal coffee bean grinder so I don't taint the taste of our coffee. So let's put this together. All right, we're going to start with 1/4 cup of our dried mushroom powder that we just made. A 1/4 cup of nutritional yeast. 1 tablespoon of salt. 1 teaspoon of garlic powder. 1 teaspoon of onion powder, 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika, 1/2 teaspoon of ground black pepper, 1/2 teaspoon of dried oregano, and 1 teaspoon of dried parsley. And we'll just grind this until it's nice and fine. And while I'm grinding it, I usually give it a little shake and I keep an eye on it. And it doesn't take long at all for this to grind into a nice fine powder. You can see how fine this turned out. It makes a perfect bouillon. And I'll just store this in a jar in our pantry, and it'll be ready to use anytime I'm making a recipe that calls for something with a nice, deep, rich, umami type flavor. Now, when I make my bouillons and my mushroom powder, I just get everything out and I make a big batch of each. If you make more than one powder, it is vitally important that you do not wash your grinder in between, because this has to be completely dry. I just take a paper towel and I just wipe out the inside of the grinder and the lid, and I get the powder from my previous mix out of it. And that way I'm sure that I don't have any moisture in it when I make my next bouillon. Okay, next let's make our chickenless bouillon. And this is something I reach for almost daily when I'm cooking. You can use it in a pasta dish, any super stew, a casserole, anything where you would have a traditional chicken flavor. You can also mix this with a little bit of arrowroot and cornstarch with cold water, whisk it on the stovetop, and you'll have a great gravy. So let's get this put together. Okay, again, we're going to use this little grinder that I have dedicated for nuts and spices and seeds. We're starting with a ½ cup of nutritional yeast. Next, we'll add 1 tablespoon of salt. And no need to jot this down. I'll put everything in the directions down below. 1 teaspoon of sugar, and I like to use a raw and bleached sugar. 1 teaspoon of onion powder. 1 teaspoon of garlic powder. 1 teaspoon of poultry seasoning. 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric. This gives it a nice golden color. 1 tablespoon of dried parsley. And 1 teaspoon of ground black pepper. That's all there is to it. That just took a few seconds. And now we have this beautiful, fine bouillon powder. It goes great in so many recipes. I'll put this in a jar and it'll store in the pantry. And let's move on to the onion soup mix. You know those little packets of onion soup mix that come in a box and that is used with soups and dips? We grew up with those and they pack a lot of flavor. But if you've looked at that package lately, it is full of unrecognized ingredients. This is a great way to make that soup. You're going to use dried onions, and we're going to blend part of those dried onions, but we're going to keep a small portion aside to add a little texture, and we'll just stir that in at the end. So to make the onion soup mix, we're going to start with ½ cup of dried onions. And I'll just put this in our little grinder. Next, we'll add 5 tablespoons of our beef bouillon. Five teaspoons of onion powder. 2 teaspoons of salt. 2 teaspoons of celery seed, and my grinder is getting very full, but I'm just mounding it up there. And 1 tablespoon of dried parsley. And again, you can make this in a food processor if you would rather make it that way. We'll just grind this and it'll be ready. Okay, this is finished. I'm just putting this into a mixing bowl, and then I'm going to add a quarter cup of the dried onions just to give a little bit of texture. And this looks just like the onion soup mix that comes in the package. You can use this in gravy, you can use it in any kind of a dip, any recipe that you would have normally used the onion soup mix for. I'll put this in a jar and it's finished. So now we have 4 clean, flavorful pantry staples that take minutes to make and save you tons of money. I make my bouillons and my mushroom powder. I just get everything out and I run through and I can make these all in less than 20 minutes. A tip, if you want a budget-friendly idea, is to buy your spices at the grocery store in the bulk section. I find that I pay about 20% the cost of buying my spices in the jar, and they all are fantastic. If you like these pantry staple ideas, please click the like and subscribe buttons so you'll catch the next recipes. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and I'll see you next time.